Good afternoon and welcome to a special edition of Talk Sports. It's the first in our Saturday Sports Special. And what better way to start this program with leading pioneers of sports administration and sports media in the Eastern Caribbean. Let me introduce my guest. Well, we do have one so far, and veteran sports journalist and columnist Raymond Roberts. He's affectionately known as Ray, as I should say. Yeah, Ray. Let's say good afternoon to Ray. And obviously, I think Ray is probably somewhere within the vicinity of the beautiful, possibly Grandon's Beach, I would hope. And as a matter of disclosure, may I say that I work with Ray Roberts at Radio Grenada, Grenada Broadcasting Corporation, and then Grenada Broadcasting Network. We have a full program ahead of us, and hopefully our next guest will join us sometime during the program. But let me welcome Ray. Ray, good afternoon.
Well, good afternoon to you, Mike, and to our viewers and listeners. It's a privilege, it's a pleasure. And let me tell you, I'm home this time. I was on the beach this morning. I just had my hour and a half, and I'm home because it's raining actually.
Oh, it's
So
Ray.
it's been raining a little bit more than usual. So I would assume that the beach might be empty because there's a saying Grenadians don't like rain. Or they're afraid of rain. I don't
You're
know.
afraid of rain.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Well, let's start off. Ray. I always start off when I do this sort of program. How you have been coping with the pandemic, Ray?
Well, I have adjusted from day one. Let me put it this way. I recognize that it is something that perhaps you have to follow the discipline, and I have tried to do that from the very start and try to adjust your life to suit, let's put it like that, to coexist with something that you don't have no control over. So from day one, I recognized I had to be home for a while. So I created my own little gym because, as you know, I'm one of those overzealous persons or people who don't like weight. I'm 161 pounds. That's been so for about almost 30 years. And I've been able to protect that. And then I had a friend, Dr. Alistair Twine, and we played table tennis 3 days a week for an hour and a half. So within the curfew, we got an opportunity to engage for the period. And now that there's no curfew, well, we have a veteran club, and a few of us go there and enjoy the sport 3 days a week. Apart from that, I'm in canteen watching a couple of the athletes doing their individual track and field work. So really and truly, and then I enjoy my church service on Sunday. So really, I really have not been in any way depressed or in any way affected to the point where I'm losing my real ability in anything.
Okay, Ray, I'm glad you mentioned the whole issue of table tennis because, for what I know, even at your age and your stage, you still play competitive table tennis, yeah?
Well, we have a over 50. I think the guys want to push it to over 60 now because the argument is I'm opposed to it in any event. But some of the guys said, look, you got to keep the younger ones out. No, it was 45. But as you know, at 45, young people who still, well, I mean, they're 45-year-old who much more athletic than us. So there are a few of us, we protect ourselves against high blood pressure. We try to avoid the things that would not push us to a medication. It has been working for a few of us, I think the majority of us, because this evening we have a 50 and over tournament at 6 o'clock. So I would say so far so good in terms of my physical health, and I think those who I'm engaged with, we actually recognize that this thing is not going to go away by having our own way. So we are trying to play it within the rules.
Ray, you have given most of your life to the sports media in Grenada. If you can probably start by telling us, especially a lot of young folks may have grew up just hearing the name Ray Roberts and involved in synonymous with sports reporting. How you actually got started in sports reporting in Grenada?
Well, let me just tell you, Pakistan took a wicket, so it's 20 something more runs and 4 wickets.
Oh, okay.
So England is 20 25 or 24 more runs, and Pakistan just took a wicket, so they need 4 more wickets.
Talking
So
about
if
sports in the blood.
right, and I'm following it too.
Right.
My interest, my participation in sports started. Let me put it this way: pretty much, I had an uncle and a family. They were all part of cricket in particular. And in the days of the Trinidad, what it was, the Guardian and I think it might have been the Express. And these newspapers came to Grenada every day. There was a place, I think when you were a little boy, your mother and you would have known Nix and Franco. So I think these two popular restaurants, they had ice cream and hot dogs, and so you got ice creams and hot dog there on the newspaper. And my uncle read from the back page. And I also developed the taste. Even up to today, the first thing I start is on the back page. Even the e-newspapers we have now, I start from the back page. So that passion for cricket in particular was there from since a little boy, come right up. And then in Grenada, we had a decent cricket field. We didn't really have many decent players, but the then Prime Minister, Sir Eric, used to like cricket. And there was always this Grenada's South St. George team playing against Sir Eric team in some kind of entertainment cricket. So you were indoctrinated because he was a passionate fan of cricket. And as I said, over the years, it grew from one level to another level. But how I started this broadcasting thing is pretty interesting. Grenada hosted the Winter Islands Cricket Tournament. I think it might have been in 1975 or 74. Any case, St. Lucia, Dominica, and St. Vincent beat Grenada. So Eric was very upset. He said Grenada cannot finish last in a tournament. They always either had to finish first or second. So he called that meeting in the Parliament building of cricketers and administrators. And very interesting, he requested from the administrators and everybody what are some of the things that would make a transition in Grenada's cricket. The first one I remember, he said, look, we got to send people to England. So Raphael Crony, former Grenada player, and I think he was a Winter Islands youth, not I think he was Winter Islands youth player, to opening batsman. And the late Kenny Hobson went to Algrova Cricket School. You remember Viv Richards and Andy Roberts went there. So I think they followed them. And one of the things that came out of that meeting was they needed to have a sports commentator, or a sports reporter. And well, I wasn't talkative that much, but I used to do little things for the Grenadian, for the Torchlight in those days. Torchlight then subsequently became the Grenadian Voice, which still exists, and I still write for it. So the guys in the room says, look, Ray Roberts, he writes a lot of nonsense every day and talks a lot of nonsense about cricket. So Sir Eric says, well, look, we'll give him a try. By then, Paul Roberts, who is not really now related, but people always had us as brothers. Paul was the Grenada goalkeeper and one of the better goalkeepers perhaps we ever had in the country. So Paul used to do sports. Paul became manager, and then, well, myself and a few others who were available, we became a subordinate to him. And in those days, in the 70s, 75 around there, announcing was the popular thing. Everybody wants to be a DJ. So everybody else then became a DJ, and sports was left to me. And I stayed in sports from there on until all now. Clearly, there were opportunities to improve yourself. The Rotary Club, I was a Rotary scholar for 2 years at Miami-Dade Community College, and other opportunities at one point, Thompson Foundation, 6 weeks at the BBC in London. So we have had quite a few opportunities, and plus my passion for sports still, I mean, it's just irresistible. All sports, just not cricket. I mean, people may say, well, look, how do you play? And you have a handicap. Well, I've played just about every sport, and some of it competitive. Well, I've not won. I haven't made a Grenada team in cricket and so forth. But if you have my age, never easy to.
Apart from table tennis, you played lawn tennis. You also played badminton.
Badminton. I played a bit of netball, a bit of basketball. Every sport that was available in Grenada certainly was a part. And the only challenge at times is because of my disability, then somebody had to run for me in cricket. So when there was 2 runs, it was 1 run. When there was three, it had to be 1.5. So you become most, well, let's put it, a liability. But that did not prevent me from actively being an administrator, statistician, a commentator, whatever in cricket. So that, well, not necessarily cricket, but all sports. And then we had a sporting club in Grenada that was strong. It went for about 25 years. It produced some of the better netballers in Grenada. We had lawn tennis players. Well, we never really had good footballers, actually. But for sure, netballers and basketballers. In fact, I saw recently the St. Lucia Prime Minister was defending his representation of that country, saying he played in 1986 with Cyril Cox. Cyril Cox is from my side. So he was in good stead. And in fact, he reprinted the newspaper. So there was no doubt about it. Hello, Margaret.
Yeah. Well, I was just about to tell you. I mean, I know we have quite a lot to cover as we still await to Reg. I think Reg might be having some problem, but certainly, you know, the fans are there, and I mean, Harold must be saying hello to you.
Harold.
Yes.
But Harold has been a co-pilot and Margaret for about the better part of my working life at the radio station and the news and with the newspapers.
Right. And interestingly enough, I'm seeing that Edwin Sam is saying about a rematch in table tennis, right?
Well, yeah, I hope he's training because I play about 12 hours a week. And I go to the beach in the morning also.
Interesting enough.
So I
Right,
hope he's good.
yeah, but let's get on to let's look at what is your assessment of sports in the OECS, because I mean you have spanned in terms of covering sports the better part of 40 years, but I mean looking on in terms of sports and the development sports, especially in the sub-region for quite a while. What is your assessment of sports in the sub-region?
Well, I would say, to be fair with you, I think we have seen significant growth in sports in terms of international representation. Just about every OECS country has stamped their authority on international sports. I mean, we could start with Grenada, St. Kitts, Antigua, Dominica, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So Montserrat, in fact, looked pretty good in the recent Caribbean football tournament. So I would think Nevis, I don't want to forget anybody, Anguilla. So I would say internationally and I mean regionally, the OECS certainly they have done well. What perhaps troubles me now is that when you look at the state of sub-regional sports, and I hope Reds join us. I think the era with Reds per created that buffer for growth. I am not seeing much of that now. I know that some people argue with me that you need to be on the international scene on the biggest, on the bigger in the bigger arena. I am not disputing that, but I still maintain you need to have quality domestic, sub-regional, and regional tournaments so that people can grow from one stage to another. Yes, many of our people are in the United States and they keep their nationality, so they represent us. But we need to see what we had in the 70s and 80s, that flourishing boxing and table tennis and lawn tennis and cricket and football. We need to rekindle those things. I cannot see any replacement for it because as I look around today, I'm seeing, well, let me see Grenada. You're seeing once they finish secondary and to a lesser extent TAMCC, they all become either they migrate to something else that is less productive in my view. And you're wondering, wasn't that the athlete from SAS or whichever secondary school who was a bright prospect in the 100 meters, 400 meters, or in cricket? And then he tells you, well, look, I wouldn't make the national team, or I wouldn't get beyond that. So I've started to sing calypso, or I've started to do something else that perhaps may not have been his calling. So, Michael, my take is that we need to review the domestic area of sub-regional sports in particular and ensure that there are levels that we can climb and grow, that we have a standard that when people, the few who go to the United States obviously have an advantage, but those who do not get that opportunity can compete into their 30s.
Do you think that the change in media climate has impacted the sports development in the region? Because, I mean, from your time, Ray, there was nothing like the internet and all these sort of
Yeah.
things. You know, now we have the internet, we have this sort of instant connection where, for example, I can be speaking to you from here in New York, you're in Grenada, you could have been on the beach, for example, or even playing table tennis and speaking to you. Do you think that change in media climate has impacted the development of sports?
Well, yes, I will agree with you. And unfortunately, I don't think our media managers, I guess the focus is on entrepreneurship, making money. And therefore, if you don't make money in sports, well, then for many people, I mean, why waste time? You may make money in doing something else. Somebody wants to host a talk show. Politicians are hosting many talk shows. So maybe that is one of the challenges, not maybe, it is one of the challenges we face. You spoke about the media back then. I mean, the late Brian McDonald in St. Lucia, we exchanged report. Even
Right.
perhaps I didn't do it, but you did it, or Harold did it, or somebody else. I could have said to you the St. Lucia cricket season, who were the top players, emerging names. The same thing I say in Dominica. I can't remember my friend name in Dominica, but we had this constant sharing of information. St. Vincent, I mean, Mike Findlay used to be part of that also too. So there are quite a number of names you could have called. Well, I mean, Reds was accessible just about every moment. Reds could tell you something about the tournament. Now, another country, it's not in the OECS, Barbados. Barbados was for us the spectacle because they had this Saturday broadcast of cricket.
Cricket.
And we in Grenada copied it actually.
Mhm.
That we were running, well, you know what I'm talking about. You run this telephone line,
Yeah.
send them 100 feet of wire, and you bring the game live. Harold, that's where Harold started. Harold will tell you his live broadcast started with these Saturday activities. Now, I can't tell you, and I'm not knocking anybody, but I'm just telling those who are listening. There's no news tonight on any of the stations in Grenada. So England and Pakistan, 6 wickets down. Pakistan need another how many runs? England need another 10 runs. So
Right.
you have to wait until Monday to get a score. And you don't know what's happening anywhere in Grenada unless somebody in the team sends it in to the radio station. So really and truly, I don't know if we'll be able to rekindle that part because it has become a global wall of money. But quite clearly, I think that, that those things are taking away from the development of sports. Because I know people who have said to me, the Saturday program that we had on radio, Grenada, not Grenada, Grenada, Radio Grenada, um, made them a passionate follower of sports. Today, as I say to you, I don't know in the other islands, but you get the most soca music, you get everything. But sports has certainly been on the down in terms of media coverage in my part of the world.
Okay. Um, I noticed that Reds is, I think Reds has joined us, and I want to say good afternoon to you. Reds, good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. Sorry about the little technical problem we faced, but very
Right.
happy to see the faces of yourself and my dear old friend Ray.
Good afternoon. Right. Well, I'll get to you in a moment, but Ray, you have been speaking there, and this comment came up here. What do you think is preventing the development of sports to the level you are talking about when you were speaking about the development of sports?
Well, let me just spend a minute to salute Reds because, as I say to people, I hope by the time, well, I hope he lives forever, but I hope we could clone him and produce a couple of young people with that volunteer spirit. Because I don't know that Reds is a millionaire up to now. When I first met Reds in Guyana in 1979, in fact, I was hesitant to even be a part of the broadcast. The revolution had occurred, and Grenada was entered in the World Cup preliminaries. And I could remember the revolution saying to me, "You have to go there to defend Grenada." And I'm saying, "What am I defending? I'm not in this thing at all." But in any case, Red was a wonderful gentleman, along with Boozer Thomas, the late Boozer Thomas. And Oh, he was the Attorney General of Ghana. Then he was a cricket broadcaster. His name just goes out of my head. And these gentlemen certainly ensured that I got a welcome. And my fear of being on a broadcast with Reds and others went away quickly. That the next day they did invite me to be in a local event. So I'm saying that to say that my engagement with Reds from 79 to now has been one of pure volunteerism, and he has an aptitude spanning maybe the world twice for seeing growth and development. And I would hope that a few countries or all the countries in the OECS could recognize that money can't bring everything. Volunteerism has to be a fundamental part of our growth. And I would hope that that spirit, I would hope it in some of our young people that are emerging.
Okay, we have another one here, Ray. You played against some of the best: Bobby B, Charlie Hood, Robert Sack, Dikoto, Wagiti Redhead, and others. Who would you consider as most competitive?
Well, that's home. The best player I would think I have encountered in the OECS is the president of the Caribbean Table Tennis Federation, St. Lucia, and Teddy Matthews. Well, I think Teddy had his grounding in Guyana. He was one of the players that a lot of us wanted to beat, and each time it was straight sets, but he was really good. St. Lucia has always had very good players. Dominica had a few, but home, Jason has been the pinnacle of it, and the late Groupsy Francis, who died, I think, earlier this year, somewhere away in New York. Yes, but I've enjoyed it, played in the Caribbean Championship too, and also had the opportunity of playing in the Commonwealth Championship in Scotland. It was a pretty good experience, but then I was much younger too. And you're talking about the impediment to sports now, Michael. Michael, it's a lot that there's more opportunities. International Federation provides us with a lot of money. We seem to be able to get the money, but I'm not too sure I'm seeing the development that we ought to be seeing. Because let's take, for instance, we have taken some of the elite ideas as franchise clubs. I see we have that now in GFA in Grenada. I think we have it in other OECS countries. So what you have is that I call them teams. Teams, they buy the best players. So that team finishes last in the tournament and you buy out the best players. And that team that finished last either go down to the lower division or it dies out after a year or two. Again, as I say to my good friend Chenny, who's the president of GFA, you have to rethink that method because in the village is where sports start. And you know that well. You came from the great Queen's Park area, Queen's Park Rangers area, community. Today you look at Queen's Park Rangers and you wonder if it's Queen's Park Rangers that you grew up with. It's a perfect shadow of what it used to be. So again, I don't know how we're going to fix these things because we take a lot from the first world, but we don't have this the basic infrastructure to make them work. I don't see how franchise could work because what you pay up what it's $200 in Grenada, I think you pay the club $250. I mean, 250 is not. I mean, I don't know if that's money. So again, these are some of the challenging things I think we need to relook. Um, Again, we have administrators today. They're not even in a club. We pick them because he or she holds a master's or a PhD and writes a lot of paper, and we see, well, look, that's it. Now we need that, but that person must be like the Walter St. John's and them, who are rooted in clubs, who are rooted in community. You can't pick people from the air to come and lead our organization. In fact, I was in the trade union movement for many years. One fella came in, he was a doctor and so. And when he reached, he spent 3 months. He said, "What? You crazy, Ray? I am losing my money in private practice." So he resigned, and that's it. So I'm saying we have to be careful how we structure these things. Yes, it's good to put all these certification on your resume. It looks good in the international world, but how much is it contributing to that development that we're talking about? Because, Mike, as you know here, there's really no strong clubs except Paradise and to a lesser extent maybe St. John's or the two clubs in St. Patrick's. Harder up. Basically, what you have here, we have 49 teams in Grenada.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, Ray, that you mentioned that now because I think that is a good introduction to Reds Pereira, who was for the better part of his tenure as the OECS sports coordinator, has been advocating for the proper club structure. And in his book, which I do have a copy of, Living My Dreams, Joseph Redspera with Catherine Atkinson, and it was forwarded by the late Tony Cozier. Reds, let's bring you in here. And Ray has been laid the foundation for what you will be speaking about, the whole issue of the proper club structure. And the question that I asked Ray that led into that as well is about the state of sports in the OECS as it is now. What's your assessment, Ray? Red, sorry.
Well, I think the club structure has never been paid the various ministries of sport in the OECS. I don't believe that the club structure has been paid attention by the associations themselves and by the various Olympic committees who know that unless their affiliates were really working towards a club structure where you have a non-playing arm of the club and you have a playing arm of the club, that was the way you will get stronger associations. In my view, I would think about 25% of the affiliates to the Olympic movement are actually functioning. 25%. After the Commonwealth Games in Scotland, I remember doing a round table with a certain association, and they then said after the Commonwealth Games in Scotland that maybe 50% were functioning. Well, I don't believe that's gotten any better. I remember doing a workshop, and I wouldn't call the name of the country in respect of protocol. I did a workshop, and all the associations attended. This is going back, 3-4 years ago. And I chose football, basketball, and cricket as an example. And I said, tell me, Mr. President, what percentage of your affiliates are clubs? And no one got past 32. It was 30, 31, 32%. Just to back up what Ray said earlier, the rest were teams. Teams can disappear overnight. Teams have no structure above it to make sure they are fundraising. There is club life. There is, in fact, some kind of link with the community. They're looking for leadership. And I think that's basically where we are. And way back in 1985, I remember telling Dr. Von Lewis, the director of the OECS, the director general, that one of the weaknesses of OECS sport was the weakness of associations and the weakness of the clubs. And I will say very quickly, I will finish now making this point. In 1985-86, the associations in the OECS were much stronger. I think now they are a lot weaker, for the same fact that you do not have the club structure. Whether it's a political party, whether it's a trade union, whether it's a church movement, it is in fact the cells that really make that grouping strong. The same thing applies to any association or federation. You've got to work at the grassroots level, the community level, to get clubs to make strong association. Strong clubs make strong association. Weak clubs, weak association.
Um, in your book, Reds, you spoke about a number of persons who had made tremendous and vital contribution to the OECS sports program when you were the coordinator. by the coverage they provided on the major radio stations. And it listed a number of persons, including Ray Roberts and Trevor Thwaites from Grenada, Jack Matthews, Dennis Sion, and King Frankai of Antigua. There was Teddy Francis, Hervan Henry, and Ryan O'Brien from St. Lucia. Colin James. There was Glenford Prescott and Michael Finley from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Curtis Matthews and Harvey Shillingford from Dominica. I think Ray was, mentioning those names. Keith Graves, well, we know him as Keith Stone Graves, and Rose Willock of Montserrat, and Vaughn Southwell and Aubrey Rogers of St. Kitts provided that sort of support during those years. Reds, what is different then and now?
Well, I think basically the success of the OECS Sports Desk was not Reds Pereira. The success of the OECS Sports Desk was a tremendous collaboration and a cooperation between the very persons you named who drove the media, who really exposed the work of the desk. It was collaboration with the various directors of sport, Cecil Greenwich in Grenada, for example, Havis Shillingford. I'm just giving you two examples. Red Samuels in Antigua, and I think the support of the various ministers of sport. I think you got a situation because of that collaboration. The news of which this was alive, happening in St. Kitts because of the constant press releases going out was known in Grenada. What was happening in Antigua was known in St. Vincent. What was happening in the BVI was known in the rest of the thing. It took a great deal of massaging, but I think because of the accumulation, the desk was alive in the eyes and ears of the people, and it was in fact a collaboration between the press, media houses, the private sector sponsorship. I mean, for example,
I think we're having a little technical issue with Red's audio. Let's see if we can get back to him. Oops, no, I think he's having a little problem. We'll try to sort that out for the time. But Ray, there is an important issue there that Lincoln told Deputy, money is critical, but there is lack of infrastructure and shortage of reliable and visionary leadership at the community and national levels. I think you were building that point earlier in your discussion.
Well, that is a fact, and Toro, nice to hear you, nice to see you and as part of the discussion. What you have, let's take Toro for example, and let's take Michael Bascom for example. Michael, Harold, you people were very productive. You were part of the development of sports. Today, you guys live in the United States, Canada, and in North America, wherever it is. So what we are seeing is a constant migration of some of the people who perhaps were the live wires in communities. And as I said to you, let's take Carnage. Carnage used to be one of the elite clubs in Grenada. Well, if you look through that list of Carnage leaders, you will only find a few of them in Grenada. The majority have migrated to somewhere in the United States. And it's what's happening across the country. So again, I don't think associations really have started to recruit individuals. When I came into this thing, I came in from Granans. There was a Granans club that was PYO, that was strong and active. I go to meetings these days. The meetings are really called for formality, because to me, the the thing that lasts the longest is eating. There's always food. The financial report, if there aren't a few troublemakers, one is me, the report goes without any attention. So really and truly, the Olympic committees in the OECS, the respective committees, the Ministry of Sports, and even the private sector, they have to recognize the importance of sports and training young people. It just can't be academics. And I noticed a thing advertised what that association should develop. I want to get the word they use, a criteria for electing officers. And among the criteria, you had a master's in. I mean, that is not going to build sports. That's just a decoration. Some of the people who really develop sports, I don't even think they completed primary school. So we have to harness talent that perhaps is talents, people who are willing to play that role and hopefully educate them at the same time. But we cannot just think about just academics because it by itself, it just don't deliver what we want to. And I hope that we begin to pay attention because the debate on West Indies cricket, hate to tell you that, I don't see how West Indies could beat any strong team 3-4 times. Yes, they'll win a test. I mean, there isn't a 3-day competition in Grenada. I grew up living on 2-day, 3-day matches on weekend. Today, the 2020 games and maybe at 35 overs. Well, you're not going to produce anything other than a fella who can, in my days, you call it VUP. So Toro is right. The vision is not there, and that is missing from the ministries of sports, perhaps Olympic committees. We need to begin to refocus on community development. And I still believe there are people willing to do it. I mean, down my side in the south, I mean, there's a young man called Brian, can't remember his second name. I mean, Brian is so passionate every year. He creates one of the biggest village tournaments, not just in the south, but in Grenada. So there's room for people at that level to be motivated and to recognize that it is volunteer and to give them the incentive and the encouragement. I don't think they're looking to be president and secretary and to take any trip away from anybody because trips has now become a poison to sports in some parts of the world. I mean, some people make it a career to travel every day and to every meeting. And basically, sometimes it's really to eat food and to collect the stipend.
Well, here is a point that is, Titus Nichols is saying, well, he's asking, what do you think about Windward Islands Cricket Championship that originally used to be a 4-day tournament, now a 2-day championship? It seems like nobody is concerned about preparing good batsmen. I cannot see any batsmen playing test cricket from that format of cricket. And I think that is what, you were really speaking about, Ray.
Well, Titus had a post and I said he was bang on target. I remember they used to play all the matches in Grenada, all the matches in St. Vincent, all the matches in St. Lucia. I think the same thing occurred in the Leewards. I followed the Leewards through Keystone Graves in Radio Antilles. And Antilles had a number of people, Julian and so forth, who were all passionate about sports. So they covered the news, yes, they were news people, but they never saw sports as an afterthought. Now, I can't understand with subsistence from the West Indies Cricket Board. In those days, when I'm talking about 70s, 80s, I mean, it was basically funded by people like Walter St. John, and they were in the private sector, Julian Hunt in St. Lucia, and Lance, not Lance, but John in St. Vincent. His first name is just out of my head. And those in Dominica. Now you have people, passages being paid, they live in hotels. In fact, in the 70s, I remember, I can talk of, these fellas lived in ordinary guest houses. And I didn't know them complaining. I mean, they were in CSA, then public, this is now public workers. I used to be there from since a fella, 69 to now. And you had quality cricketers. Today, people are paid. People live in, I understand the hotel must be a 3-star, that's the lowest they can stay. And there's no, Grenada had St. Andrew with 40 teams. The last 2 years, they have only played 35 over per side competition. St. George's is 2020. St. David's, they got a 2020. St. St. Patrick's and, well, they have a T20, I think. St. John's and St. Mark's is the same thing. Caracou is the same thing. So we have 6 parish leagues. And in the 6 parish leagues, and may I say that I'm told that we are one of the strongest pillars of Winter Islands cricket. Well, if that represents a pillar, I really, really don't understand what the others got. Because it bothers me. And it may be true because we have how many? 5 players or 6 players on the team. So if we have that number, yes, they may be outstanding and special players. But I can't see how you can have people, batter G, concentrate for more than an hour to make the West Indies team and beat England in back-to-back test matches, as we just had. I thought our defeat in England was a lack of the ability to play sustainable cricket over the 3 test matches being in what, 3 weeks?
Interesting enough, right? And so a lot you covered on it bordered on sports policies, and some in some of the islands, including Grenada, which I know there is a sports policy which is law, as far as I know, since 2010, 2011, somewhere there, it was actually enacted law. However, in most cases, they have failed to implement these sports policies. Do you think that, to some extent, that these policies in the sub-region are not addressing the whole issue of sports development?
Well, I wouldn't say they're not addressing. I mean, there's a rewriting of the Grenada sports policy. I mean, I'm glad to see that they have included Paralympics, and I wish they could make a study of it. I'm taking a plug for Paralympics because it's a new sport in Grenada, and I notice it's growing in St. Vincent also too. So that's wonderful for the OECS. I'm saying to you that what is missing from all of this is what Toro spoke about. This is a wonderful document that is written by people of the highest quality. But Michael, there's no base for that document to grow. If that document is to grow, it has to begin where the fundamentals must be taught in communities. The trainers or the administrators from the community must be somewhat schooled into that policy, because if they have mastered the content of it, the key points or the key developmental areas, they would then work with that in mind. But Mike, I'm not too sure even those who write it read it. I saw my good friend, President of the Senate, Chester Humphrey, making a point what day it was that he was schooling parliamentarians. Don't come to the parliament with a document and don't read the document. Because I was there for 4 years, and I can remember a friend of mine telling me, what are you reading that for? The bill go pass. I said, no, I like confusion. So I'm going to read it to play the devil's advocate. And I did that for 4 years. No, I'm saying I think that attitude is manifested at all levels of our society. You know, you grew up without no internet and Picedy and Toro and everybody. And Toro wrote his book, Wonderful Details of Carnage, when he was a little boy and growing up and so forth. Well, you can get that on the internet, I suppose, now, so you get it in videos, so you don't have to read. But I hope we could create some kind of training program where administrators, and it has to be, Michael, at the village level, because that's where it starts. The National Association can only be strong if you have quality leaders at the village level. They are going to be the people who are indoctrinated from a very early stage. They're going to climb the ladder. But if you're just going to keep doing what you're doing, Michael comes back with a bachelor's, a master's, a PhD, and he used to play sports in GVSS 25 years ago, but he has not bothered with that for the last 24 years. And you think he's going to be installed as president because you have a lovely resume to show the rest of the world. Michael, that will look good abroad. That is not going to develop your sport.
Yeah.
It has to be something enrooted in people. Now, let me put it to you. I go to church every Sunday. Nothing stops me. Even the days of the revolution, Margaret will tell you, they would never schedule me on a Sunday morning. They used to call me the Christian Democrat. Peter David he still calls me so. The only thing that make me skip church on a Sunday is if there's a cricket match in Queen's Park, Windward Islands, or there's a regional game. No, maybe that's not something to be saying, but I'm telling you, that's how passionate I am. Um, if you look, I mean, I suppose you've seen some sections in my house, you'll see all trophies, all things of McEnroe, and that's my age group. You'll see pictures of all these guys. So it is an indoctrination I have, and I know quite a number of people. I mean, when Toro comes to Grenada, we argue about Carnage because I was a supporter of Queen's Park Rangers and 100, right? So that is the kind of thing you need to enroot in people. But Michael, I would hope that, again, I'm not too sure, again, ministers of sports that we have these days are like the Roy St. John and the Jacqueline Creff. I'm not too sure, maybe Patrick Simmons is in that. I'm not too sure there are people with that. Again, a lot of it is academic and it sounds good. But when you look at the villages, I mean, I am so hot about St. Andrew, the parish. St. Andrew had 40 cricket teams. That cricket tournament was not just cricketing. That was an economic institution for the parish of St. Andrew, which is the biggest in Grenada. You go to any of the playing fields on a Sunday, I mean, they sell everything, beers, food. I mean, everything you get there. So people made a living off of that. This thing has deteriorated. And I asked my question myself. Yes, the minister is building two nets, but we need to get look, primary schools. There's no primary school sports again. Yes, the kids may be going into secondary school, but once you get in that secondary school, parents seems to have it's all academic. 16 subjects, 20 subjects. I try to understand why it's 16 and 20, but I mean, I'm an old person now, so I don't really have the vision that these young ones have. But again, this is where we have to go back. I lived in Miami for 2.5 years, and I know community sports still exist and volunteer coaches. That's where it starts. And we have to have them things back in Grenada.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, Hamlet will tell you that his YSFM actually took root with what you're speaking about in terms of the cricket. You know, they on a Saturday and a Sunday, that is what he was doing, basically getting the Claudius George and all the others from the various grounds. I mean, getting you the scores one after the other because they were playing a lot of cricket in the parish, you know, probably 10, 20 years ago. He will tell you that. Ray, I think we would have lost Reds because he has some technical difficulty, but there's a very important thing that came up here from Cleve Depardine. Today's sponsorship is not geared towards assisting the weak, but seeking, identifying with the strong. And that in itself is a wedge to the development of sports. Back in the day, or what day you're referring to, every team was able to secure sponsorship. Ray will understand. You speak about Dano, Phoenix, etc. Today, if you are not ranked as the best, you can forget it. Secondly, weak administration will only foster weak athletes. Ray?
Well, he has a point there, but as far as I know, let's take GFA. GFA pays, I think, the entry fee of most of the clubs, or some of the clubs, or if not all the clubs. They give them some kind of contribution towards their participation. So whatever it is, $5,000 or whatever it is, I think there's a portion of it. Most of the teams in football are sponsored. I think what has happened now, Clever, is that, remember, Clev, the first division had 12 or so competitive teams. I don't know that there was any really weak teams. Yes, there was Limbeck sometimes collected 6 or 7 goals, but Limbeck's created upset sometimes. So there was always, I would say, 90% quality teams. Today, you look at this thing. I mean, if you come to Tantine, I'm in Tantine nearly every day. That's why I like, because the COVID thing gives me a chance to sit in the pavilion with 1 or 2 people and avoid crowds. If you see 20 people in Tantine, you're very lucky. Albert Joseph is a consistent user with about 20 athletes. Then there's a young man called Lee with another 15 or so. And now Leicester has started a women's, I think it's for everybody, training. And there are about 20 other people come from 5 in the morning until about 5 in the evening to train physical fitness. But it's not the canteen that was for Toro and his brother and all of them. It's a completely different canteen. It's void of football, cricket. You hardly see a cricketer there. So yes, sponsors are now going to put their money into some of the things. I mean, that you've seen. It has to be of substance. So yes, sponsors look for the elite teams, but I think many other parishes or villages. Let's take my side. You had South Stars. South Stars, after 2 years, they were a classic. They reached the Premier League. And then the next year, they went back to the second division, or the first division. The third year, they went into the second division, and they hardly exist now. I mean, the sponsorship gone. So you can't blame a sponsor for taking away his sponsorship if you were that wonderful. And within 2 years, I mean, you crash. So again, it goes back to what I'm saying, because you had people like the late Barrymore McBarnett. He was doing some work with the guys in Montu and Grants Valley. And then, well, I suspect he might have been ailing then, because he said to me, Ray, I think I want you to come and help, but I already never went in. But he gave it up, and Barry was one of those people that certainly knew about leadership. So again, it goes back to our failure to work with people at the community level to train leaders. To train, I was talking to some young people, and that's during the recent process. We had about 25 of them. Yes, they're all bright, but like I said to one of them in a discussion on some Canadian station or whatever it was, when I went to Grenada Assembly of Youth, well, they said I came to spy for Gary. That wasn't true, although I'm still a Gary Wright. But we had a strong club named PYO that was active. That was in the days of Bogo Conwell, Akiga Hagan. Well, George Lewison was a little ahead of us, but he was the president. But the point I'm making, you had substance when you came to a meeting of the Assembly of Youth. When, in fact, Toro, well, the first year we played GFA, 73, I think Yankee Man scored about 12 goals against Grenada. We were beaten 15-0. But we had a team. It had village connection. Today, you don't have leaders. You don't have leaders. So, Clever, I would think our role has to be to, I mean, Clever, you would surprise to see the carnage that play now in GFA. I mean, they turn up with 10, sometimes 9, sometimes 11, sometimes 15, whatever. But that's not the carnage I know with Charlie Hood and Bruce Bain and Barry James and so forth. So what is being done, I'm not too sure anything is being done. I heard you had a chat with Joel, what night it was, and I think the focus, you were putting the question whether or not TAMCC should be doing something to, when they get their athletes from secondary, they should have a program to see that they continue. Well, I have a different take. My take is TAMCC should have a physical education program that incorporates training of coaches. I know you can't have for all at the same time, but maybe this period, 2-year period, because it's the associate degree, you work with footballers. Maybe the next period you work with cricketers. Then maybe you could do a netball or whatever it is. But I think you need to do things like that. We have how many coaches, they tell me? We have a full staff with supporting, we have 81, I'm told. Not all are permanent. Some are temporary, money, whatever it is. Now, some of them, I know them very well, and I say to them every day, give you another 5 years, and you're going to be a has-been. And I say, what do you mean? I say, let me tell you. This cycle goes around so fast. Try to use TAMCC or SGU as a means of qualifying yourself so your credibility becomes not just local, but regional. So that's what I'm saying. We need, if the ministry through TAMCC, I prefer work through the TAMCC. I let the ministry provide the funding, TAMCC do that. I hate to work through politicians. I'm not one of those who really believe in politicians, although I'm a bit in it, but I don't really believe in politics. I believe it's better to work through institutions that are credible. And I would hope that, Michael, things as a sports policy, we can have TAMCC as part of its physical education program, indoctrinate And there are quite a lot of interest because if there are 81 coaches or so, clearly, and that's in what? All the disciplines, 17. So it's a big spread. So we need to think about things like that.
Okay, Ray. This one, the biggest cheerleader in sport is the broadcast media. Now it has abdicated its responsibility. Do you think it will ever come back? Our experience covering the village sports with live broadcast showed the athletes that they were worthy of recognition, even at the pedestrian level. That's from Harold.
Harold, good to hear you. And Harold knows a thing or two about the success we had in the late 70s. I remember Harold from GBSS coming to Radio Grenada and presenting the package at times and doing in major newscasts. And when he left school, he came writing. Um, Harold, I'm not apologizing for that period. You really don't have program directors and managers anymore. What you have are people who perhaps, I can understand it because it's money that keeps the whole thing going. And therefore you have to pay staff, you have to keep the station, you have to keep the station bills up to date. So really and truly, Mike and Harold, the managers we have now, I don't see any of them having any interest. I don't think they demonstrate interest in sports. Yes, the Olympics and the West Indies team, that's a money because they go to the commercial market and they sell and they're able to bring in income. But plain words, Harold, I don't see, I could speak for Grenada because I live here. I don't know, maybe Andrew Donald may be the exception with his station in St. Patrick's, what it is, I think is, I'm
Really?
not too sure, Real FM, right? There's a young man there who consistently would call and get information. But the others, I mean, as I tell you, listen Monday morning. If you get the result that England just won this test match there by 3 wickets, you'll be lucky. You'll be lucky to hear that. In fact, lunchtime yesterday on the major newscast, England and Pakistan are engaged in the first test. And the scores are available on channel 512, and we don't have it. So, Harold, the media is absent in the development of sports in a serious way. Some are trying, but I guess recruiting people like yourself and Bascom may be a problem because, as you know, it's volunteer. Those of us, I didn't make any money from that. And I know City and Bascom didn't make any money, neither did Paul Roberts. So I don't know if we can find people who are willing to do that volunteer. Claudius George, Peter Blair. You know, I listened to Andal, the one who owned Andal, the team from St. Patrick's. I remember when this guy recruited this guy in PRG days. The first report he did took, I would say, about an hour. Every sentence, he couldn't complete a sentence. You know, Toro, remember that, the guy from St. Vincent, he was Attorney General, Jomo Thomas. I mean, I could remember Jomo stringing a couple of stories for us in the days of Radio Free Grenada. Today he's a brilliant attorney. He was what, Speaker of the House or President of the Senate not too long ago. So volunteerism, after a while, if you blossom, could bring you a lot of rewards. So I'm making an appeal that if there are people listening to us, think about it just for the greater good, just for the good of the sport. Call the radio station, see if you can make contact with the managers, because that's the key. Contact with the news directors, managers, and hopefully after a time they would recognize that it has become an asset to the listenership rather than a hindrance.
Yeah, because I was speaking to a group of students some time ago, and I was telling them that when we started in radio, myself and Raul and others, and Ray will know that we never got paid. People like Ray and them would have picked up some money every month and give us something because we had us to prove ourselves. It took us quite a while before we actually got our first paycheck. Now, once you start, right away you get paid, and and that's how it is. But we had us to go through the ropes, and at the time it was called, you were a cub reporter, right? These days, once you got the job, you become a reporter, you become a journalist, you have the mic, you can do this and that and the other. But Toro had made a point earlier, Ray, while he was speaking about your favorite politician, and Uncle Gary, who was the main sponsor of Grenada PYO. I think he was speaking about PYO. The late Nordica McIntyre, strong and flourishing club, Ray.
Yeah, there were people like Fly James Fly in 1976. Well, I don't like to use that because I think it sends a wrong connotation. But Fly was perhaps the only local person on that team because the tennis team then, it was Naki Steele, Tony Rennick, George Rennick. I can't remember the two females. But if you look, he still puts up that picture. And it had nothing to do with anything else. And Gary came and they saw us playing in True Blue after Expo 69. Little fellas, he said, where are these fellas from? They say, Granans. He said, Granans has all this talent. And then he built a court that you see by the going down by the vendors market. The same thing again, I met Scarallo not too long ago. I think maybe a year ago, Scara was giving me the joke. The basketball team was going to Dominica. We had a fellow named Kenneth St. John. He was a decent player, but he wasn't up to the standard of the Grenada team. So Gary said, look, we have to have a guy from the South. So he said he tried to tell Sir Eric, look, you can't pick him because he's from the South. He has to make a team. So Gary agreed that he would go with the team, but he would pay for him. So he said, look, Ray, to cut it short, there's a quota. Dominica was hosting the tournament, there's a quota. So when he reached in the airport, he realized, well, they don't have the money to pay for this extra guy. So he called Sir Eric. Sir Eric answered the phone. He said the lady in the airport had a snack. He called her, said, give Scara, well, Scara's friend, give Mr. Lowe whatever sum of money he wants. I will refund him. so really, he went to Dominica to be exposed. And that perhaps was a tonic for basketball in Granada because, I mean, many of the top players now are from that area. I mean, started Cyril Cox, who played in Division One in the United States, a collegiate tournament. So the investment worth the while. But Mike, you mentioned about your era. One of the best examples I tell people, Zeret Macmillan. Zeret was in Form 5, and for whatever reason, he said he was not Form 5, Form 6. He said he wanted to get into broadcasting. So I happened to came in the radio station, and he said to me, you know my mother, you know my father. I said, well, who are your parents? He said, Venice. I said, well, look, we can't employ you because we don't have money. He said he'll stay. So for about 3 months, the staff, then we collected a sum of money, maybe $20, $25 from everybody. And we gave him, and he stayed with that. And today when I watch him on broadcast, I tell guys, that is a model of how nurturing young people can pay off at this stage because he's a wonderful interviewer. He's a wonderful spectacle on Hamlet's Sunday program, asks very appropriate questions, seems to be very knowledgeable about Caribbean, local affairs, and international affairs. So there is value in giving your time voluntarily. And first of all, don't look for money. Money will come. If you're good, you're coming out of the pack before anyone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Clev is asking, should we clean house? And he's advocating it's not politics. Eh?
Well, let me put it this way. Michael, let me put it to you. I heard Joel said the same thing, but I want to tell Joel, I have, let's put it this way. I gave up cricket at one point. They came back and asked me to be the chairman. I stayed for 4 years. And then I gave up again. Well, I'm not seeing any cricket in St. George's. So I did not in any way hesitated that maybe I'm getting elderly. I'm an elderly citizen now. So I gave up. I have not seen any cricket in St. George's. The same thing in St. Andrew. You had people there doing it for years. Then you had somebody took over the presidency and bam, it ended up where it is now. So I want to be careful by saying to you that, Clev, I think unless you begin to do some work at the community level with the indoctrination of the sports policy and people who have experienced the challenge of working with community groups. Toro, let me tell you one of the things. Richie Hughes, for me, is one of the darling of local sports. Richie works with the junior tennis players. He becomes the driver, the transportation person, the person who drives them home after, who actually check their schooling and so many other things. Now, that is what I grew up in sports doing. The first car I had That's what it is. And the second, in fact, all the vehicles I've had. Sometime I remember one night, one of the guys, now he was a good footballer. He used to play for Hard Rock. He was about 15. Now, 8 o'clock, he couldn't get a bus. So he comes back to see us and say, Mr. Ray, there's no bus. I had Ray. Junior was about 7 years. So I had to pull up the car, leave Junior by somebody, and go up to St. Patrick's. Nobody paid for the gas. Nobody paid for anything else. I'm just telling you, those are the things when you get into sports that you are obligated to do. There's a young cricketer in St. David's. After the match, he couldn't get home. I remember when I reached his home and the man who opened the door is a former Grenada fast bowler. I said, that's your son? He said, well, yes. I said, but he never told me so. So had I left him in town to struggle, the father would have said, Ray, I thought you were a better person. So my friend, in clean house is good to talk about. I hear them say that sometime in Olympic committee. I say, fellas, look, maybe we need to do that. But who are your replacements? Some of the replacements, my brother, it's just for the travel, just for the travel. And the moment of the Kirani James, the moment of the Anderson Peters. Beyond that, I'm not convinced that some of the changes, yes, I'm not defending who there, and I hold no office right now. So except Paralympics that I was asked to be president and I accepted willingly. And I'm trying. But I'm saying to you, we have to be careful about when we talk about clean house, because some people appear, and when they realize it's just not a clean house, it is for them to do the work that perhaps they never catered for. And then some of them, I remember my friend, I won't call his name, his wife came down with Auntie. She said, she had him the checkbook. She said, you could come for your clothes. You and Ray could stay married to cricket. Because everything was in that. No, I mean, I could call his name, like, I won't call his name, I just reverse it. It is not easy because it is something that when you look, it is poor people, children who play sports already, I said to somebody, I saw the late Trevor Tweed did something a day. Kirani was no Kirani James yet. He was going to GGBS. He was on the bridge looking for a ride. And Trevor, well, because of the sport, but about maybe 13 years or something around. Trevor called him and he said, what are you doing? You're looking for a ride to go. Trevor pulled out a sum of money and gave him. And the beauty thing about that, he then called all the boys around. They bought some bread and whatever it is, and they all moved together. He didn't take it and just run, And I tell people, that is one thing that will always stay out in my mind. Trevor, the late Trevor Tweed, how genuine he was as a person. And that's just one case. Could call a million other cases that some people who are in sports are not for it because there's a trip. It is because people like me, I go on the beach every morning. I'm not going for anything else. I just believed. You know who told me about the beach? I was a little fella within a pipe, so I come down to the beach. So Dennis Henry, the late Dennis Henry saw me. He said, son, you're doing the right thing. This is the tonic that you need. And then I met Mr. Chichester. He and his wife walk the beach every morning. He says, you're doing the right tonic. You're doing the right thing. Come on, let me see you. And I began to inherit this thing in the late 60s, 70s. Today, I'm still on the beach, and that's my tonic. And I am not getting anything from it, except that I believe I'm in good health because of it. Okay. So, Mike, we have to be careful when we're talking about clean house.
Mm-hmm. But Toro is also saying sports just seems to be something tagged onto the news, and you often get the sense that some reading sports are just doing that, just reading. There seems to be scant understanding or passion of many of the sports items being read.
Well, I heard one female announcer saying the bowling, in cricket we say Michael Bascom has bowled 8 overs, 2 maidens, 3 wickets, whatever it is, and she could not internalize the initials of R for runs, W for wicket, and really made a mess of it. You couldn't comprehend what she really wanted to say. Now I'm saying again, Margaret, I saw her name up a while ago, a picture. Patrick Smichaels. Patrick Smichaels was an indoctrination for everybody in these things. You can't. First of all, Patrick will tell you, I remember when Beyond Bog started, and Trevor used to say some kind of Bijan Bog. Patrick said, you are schooled by the BBC. Go get it right there and say it after them. Now, I don't know if we have that kind of managers or news directors or people who have that passionate interest. Mike, I don't know we have that anymore. Um, Toro, I don't know what we could do, but much of it now centered. Everybody wants to be a DJ. Everybody wants to be in the popular form of the art, and not in something that, to me, it has equal recognition to all that we talk about. You know, Michael, I tell folks, I went to a meeting. Where did I go to a meeting? I think it was in Spain last year. And some people were trying to figure out Grenada and Grenada. And I sensed there that they were lost. And I said, you remember Kirani James? And that was the
I
everybody turned,
yeah.
turned around and wanted to know if I'm from there and what was his tonic for his achievement. And okay, so that one word create a circle that was not there in the first place. I mean, nobody, I'm not knocking anything else to say nobody knows about the soca, the whatever it is, but that one word, that Kirani G, that symbol is enough to tell people, well, look, the Kirani James and the revolution. People seem to have these two institutions, I call them, as symbols of Grenada.
This is something I meant asking you, and your good friend Harold is on the ball with it. I'm sure you will like to relive some of the great moments of the OECS sporting tournaments and how much our Grenadian athletes and administrators contributed to its success.
Well, no doubt. I mean, you have to recognize Cecil Greenwich, who was director of sports, and Keith Joseph. I think nobody could ignore Keith Joseph's contribution. He was president of athletics in Grenada at one time. In fact, very strange. I remember the 79 period. The Athletic Association did a publication, and I still have a copy of that publication, talking about the development of athletics and what the vision was then. Now, Michael, I have not seen a publication from the Athletic Association in I don't know how many years. I'm talking about 79. They had this thing. And then you had people like Vida. There's no question that they were institutions of the growth of this thing. And Reds mentioned some of the other colleagues in the OECS. I mean, there was just an absolutely wonderful partnership. And I have made some friends, still good friends across the OECS that I remember as a result of these activities. I mean, I noticed Charles Bellot from Antigua. He's now the president of the Antigua Table Tennis Association. I could remember his activities in Grenada. As I said, people again, I remember again the OECS tennis tournament. And I remember Kobe from Trinidad was then one of the top players, the top player in the Caribbean, female player, coming to Grenada and play Selma. Philip was then emerging, and I remember Bernadette Russell, who was also a 15-year-old. And I mean, Kobe was the winner. But the point I am making here, they were able to demonstrate that he could push her, even though she won. Again, we need that kind of regional or sub-regional mix. I'm not seeing that again. I mean, let's take what we used to call the Barnett Tennis Cup. I mean, I could never forget that. Yes, they tell me they have all kind of things these days, but you had people, you had juniors and you had seniors. The same thing applied to, well, volleyball is continuing, although not consistent. Boxing is struggling. I don't think they may be one or two better boxers than we had then because, they have more exposure, they have more training opportunities. But again, the OECS boxing tournaments of the early years that Harold was a broadcaster on and Toro would have covered and Margaret would have accompanied me to see. The laughter is still there. And Michael, you would have known about them. I wish that in a new form, we could see these activities. And I hope, our colleagues in the OECS, I know ministers of sports meet and sometimes coordinators of sports meet. I hope that they can think about these things again because we still have the Winter Islands secondary school games wonderful event that should never stop. But I hope we could also see things like table tennis and basketball. Well, no, they have basketball, but the sports that are out of it, hope we can find a way to include them. Because let's let's just agree on one thing: sports is just not for recreation alone. Sports is also wellness. It
Wellness.
also contributes to the wellness of the nation. I mean, Michael, and no offense again. I mean, I'm seeing, I really sometimes wonder, so many fat people in the country. I mean, you look at a convent or a high school or any other schools cross country, and you're wondering, I mean, yes, there were fat people in my days, and I suppose in every era, but the number of fat people you've seen cannot finish the race. You're asking yourself, I mean, we must have the problems that we have now. So we need to see sports not just as competition, but we need to see it as a greater sector of our development as a people.
Yeah, because well, we have lost Reds, but obviously the Reds would have made that point that when the proposal to the OECS sports desk was made, well, to the OECS secretariat was made for the formation of the sports desk, the focus at that time was on physical education, not so much competition. Competition was just a component of it,
Mhm.
But Margaret is asking there, Ray, and she's, well, both yourself and myself, are there any dedicated sports reporters in Grenada today? I'm here in New York, you in Grenada, Ray. Can you respond?
Well, there's a little fella in Real FM. I really appreciate him. He takes an, I can't remember his name. Actually, I've never asked him his name. And he's around 20 years. His father died, I think, earlier this year.
Yeah,
He's around 1920. I can't remember his name. A little fair skinned guy.
yeah.
But it's a wonderful young man.
Very,
And he,
very, very disciplined and
right.
yeah,
It's always so.
yeah, well, yeah,
Right.
caught that.
I would single him out as one, I would hope. And then there's Giselle Sylvester. I
Sylvester.
like her attitude. I like her knack for this internet. And if there's a broadcast and Grenadian athletes are involved or OECS athletes involved, she would make the link available. She's always visible, taking pictures of event, posting. I don't know how passionate she is about being knowledgeable about the sports itself. I think you need that kind of. Well, they are the two people I could really pinpoint. I really, well, I mean, Selwyn Well is in WFM, so Selwyn is not, Selwyn is my age. I don't know anybody else. I mean, I wouldn't, I mean, Joe Cador, I would certainly say you are my good friend, but I don't think that Joe is as passionate as any of you guys were about sports. Yes, if he sees a sports, he follows it. But I would hope that because being a journalist doesn't mean that you are just rigidly assigned to sports. You could branch up to. I mean, George Rome did sports. Toro did sports. Toro is equally great at sports as he is at news writing. Margaret, you tried a bit too. So I don't think it's something. I hope the TAM-CC program could create a lot more than what they're doing because it seems very focused on news and so forth. So maybe, Mike, that is something we need to push.
Yeah,
That
and Harold was not just a sports, but Harold is also a singer. He tried singing.
and Roy was the best vocalist, Donkey McCain.
Okay, very much so. Uh, yeah, Jacqueline Smith, Joseph Fred Pereira was a great organizer and promoter of sports in the OECS. That's Jacqueline Smith and Trevor Tweets and Fingers provided some of the more memorable boxing matches in Grenada. Somehow Toro will remember these things.
Well,
Yeah.
well, it is the most memorable boxing event ever occurred. I mean, the guy was from Fort Bragg. He was about 22, 23. Goldfinger was about, well, Walter told me he had to be 50. So Walter said he was older than him. And when he walked out, Walter called me and said, "Ray," I was the secretary of boxing then, actually. He said, "Ray, this is an old man way." I said, "Well, I don't know." So Harold was the broadcaster on board, I think, that day. I mean, the white, the Americans say, "This old man, Joe Goldfinger said, come, 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 I'll teach you a couple of things. Two punches and the thing was over. I mean, everybody who was there, including the announcer, I think it might have been Harold or whoever it is, I think the whole thing burst into a laughter that was uncontrollable for about 5 or 10 minutes.
um,
But he's still alive. I think he's still alive. I see Malika and I just struggling these days.
okay. Ray, I saw earlier that Clev was making mention of um, the John Diabo, the time with John Diabo, you know.
Yeah, John is still my.
Yeah, obviously for those who you would have worked along with John Diabo, for those who didn't know about John Diabo, what can you tell us about John?
Well, John undoubtedly is I would say, the father of the Grenada Olympic Committee. He didn't start it. That was started really by Roy St. John. And again, according to Scara, so Eric Matthew Gary wanted Grenada to participate in the Winter Olympics. There was some buddy from Austria who was his friend and wanted to represent Grenada. So Scara said to me that they formed this Olympic exploratory committee was the late Dr. Bezinski, Adolf, I think was the name Bezinski. It was Rupert John, the late Nattery Smith, his brother who died, Roy St. John, and a few of them. And Scara told me he was the youngest there. So they picked a committee and they assigned him to go to the princery under instructions to make a letterhead. So he said he brought the thing and the guy took his name. And when the guy finished with that stuff, the guy put his Scara as secretary. So when he brought it back to the office, Uncle Gary said, that's okay. We really don't need any secretary. You will be the secretary. And he sent it off to the IOC in those days. Avery Bondage was the president then. And he said to us, well, look, that was the formation of this thing that really started then. But John, during the PRG reign, this thing rekindled when the revolution fell apart. I suspect, I'm just suspecting, the Americans wanted a feel good for Grenada in 1984 when the Olympics was staged in Los Angeles. So they were very instrumental in Grenada becoming a full member of the IOC. Now, Grenada went to Moscow with Maitland, but Grenada was not a member of the IOC. They were there in some other status, but in 84, Grenada became a full member of the IOC. John Diabo was the secretary. And I'm telling you because, I mean, I'm not telling you DC.
Yeah.
John was, as you know, anybody will tell you, that was one of his trusted friends. I mean, he died the Saturday, and the Friday, me, Trevor Modest, Trevor Tweets, and Dan Darat was by him. He had a thing he used to call fufu. And we went by him to eat the fufu on the Friday. Saturday morning, I'm on the beach. Cecil Greenwich comes, tells me, I have bad news for you. I said, what's the bad news? He said, John died. I said, but how he died? I was by him yesterday. He said he has asthma and the asthma, whatever. But I mean, I could even tell you one other thing. Where I live now, two of us bought a plot of land together. He paid for it the Friday, and Fly was showing up by him the Saturday for the money, Fly Sylvester. When Fly reached by where he was living by Otway, Fly saw Otway and said, where's John, this short bitch? Otway thought Fly knew that he dead. He said, come let me show you where he there. When Fly reached Otway Point in the coffin. So for Fly, that was a terrific shock. So John was the person who pioneered this thing. He and Juan Antonio Samaraj, ring and finger. And John died in the late 90s. And Vida emerged as Ambrose was then the general secretary. He resigned, and then Vida became the general secretary until today. And Lai became president then, and then that's how it continues for the last 30-something years. These people have been unchanged as the leader of that organization. But there is no doubt, John, I mean, what a sports. During Uncle Gary, what a parade. Do you remember that? Uncle John Diabo was the one who had Maitland Smith and them. We had water polo, and John was the secretary of water polo. Pioneering OECS boxing, that was John Diabo also. So he was not football. He was part of the GFA, not the leadership, but one who followed the sports and did the secretarial work in terms of Coach August Uta was here then.
Yeah, I was about to ask you about Coach August. Margaret is suggesting about a sports journalism program at TMR should come to college because she sees it as a whole specialty in itself.
Well, I don't know how strong the program is again. Nigel Graves Sandy. But Michael, you were president, I was secretary when that program started.
Yeah.
And I usually tell fellas I have all the notes inside it still. In fact, I tell fellas I need to clean up this house because I need maybe to get rid of some of these things. And Nigel took a personal interest in that program. No, Nigel is back in Guyana. I don't know. I know Mr. Fleming also had a personal interest. I don't know what is the status of the program, and I don't know how creative the people in the program are. But I've always argued that sports ought to be a part of journalism. Sports reporting, sports broadcasting, just like you do announcing, just like you do all the other areas of communication. Sports and games must also be an integral part of that 2-year program. I don't know. Maybe I'll ask the president, Sherry and Noel, to maybe consider influencing something to do with sports because, Michael, we are in a bad shape. You know, I went to a couple press conferences and I'm hearing some dumb questions. And you can't blame them because, again, if you never played sports, I mean, you only ask dumb questions. Dumb questions. I mean, there was one, Otto Baldwin, I think that was one, still a standout. He wanted to know why, asking him why a picture of Francique is not at the airport along with Kirani. And he had to see, well, look, is that a question? Yes, Francique was good. But the gold medal winner is Kirani. And you don't put pictures of everybody because they compete. I mean, again, why would you ask anybody of that level such a question? So again, it has to be tutoring that would gear you to know who your audience and who you're talking to. I mean, that may be good for me as a local person, but that being put to somebody of that magnitude would clearly have an interpretation. These people in this little island, they really don't have a clue as to what is broadcasting or journalism in sports.
Well, always remembering at your days in Miami-Dade, where you were sent to cover fencing and baseball.
And let me tell you, I got an award for covering. I got a Florida Community College third place award for covering golf. In fact, the guy was a pretty decent golfer. And he was in the top 15 in the United States. He's actually from Florida. I'm trying to remember his name. But yes, Toro will tell you we were assigned. And the Miami-Dade Community College had a decent newspaper, the Falcon Times, which did well in Florida Community College. You know, Michael, you up there, Margaret up there, the communication newspapers and radio stations. In all these.
I remember you came back with a few copies of those things.
Yeah. In fact, I still have the story here.
Yeah.
And I tell guys, we were sent to these activities, and you couldn't say that. I mean, fencing for me, I never really find fencing worthwhile, but I did go and I did cover it. I mean, American football, I look at it, but I still can't. Well, in my book, it's not a sport. To me, it's a barbarian affair. But I look at it on Sundays. I must tell you, I'm a fan of the Chicago Bulls, not Chicago, the Chicago Bears.
Yes,
I'm a fan of the Bears, and I like the Los Angeles
Rams?
49ers. No, the 49ers.
Okay.
Right. But you had to do it, and I took it as Toro was there, Lydia was there, and I don't know that we in any way made it a debate that we didn't know it and we weren't schooled in it, and that is not a sport. In fact, Mike, I'll tell you one thing. The first story I wrote my favorite phrase. The player was in a no-nonsense mood, and David asked me, "What the hell is that?" He said, "At this college, that's not the language for here." And I couldn't forget that at all. No nonsense, because you before that, a fella is dominating the sport, and you say he's in a no nonsense mood. He said, no, we communicate in the appropriate language.
Mm-hmm. Well, Clem is saying that highly recommending, very informative conversation with you, Ray, and highly recommend the book, The Energy of Golf by Fitzgerald Naka Joseph, a must read. In fact, Naka will be the guest on our program come Thursday. Ray, have you had a copy of the book? Was it?
Yeah, I have it somewhere on top here, but Naka is my friend. He accuses me of all the things that I'm innocent of. I tell him I'm certainly going to be to heaven before he gets there. Let me tell you, when Naka was writing this book, there was a young lady called, they used to call her Chexie. She was a good long distance runner. I think was she a Charles? Oh Lord, Naka is going to cost me again. He said she was from Guelph, that's where I couldn't remember her name. So I remember that time I had a Catalonia. So him and Naka, him and his partner came to see me. And I brought out all these books, all these albums and so forth. And I'm showing him way back from the 70s what I've accumulated. And then he look and he sees this girl and he says, boy, you're so wicked. You have this girl, I'll be looking for that picture. And you never, I said, but who is this girl? When I look, I recognize that was in the first sports awards we ever had. That was in 1980 at what was then, they called it now, I'll tell you what they call it now. It used to be Gary Place coming along, Monuge there. That's place on the side. It was sort of like a dome. West Hall was the guest speaker there. So we had all these pictures. And she in those days was the top road runner in Grenada. She was a Curve Games, I think, silver medalist in the 1500. She is in the United States, but she's in his book. And I must tell you that I've looked over the book. I have not plagiarized it, Naka, but I've used it I'm using it. I paid how much for it? I can't remember how much I paid for it. But I'm trying to take out some of the dollars and cents. It's a good book. I noticed there are people that like Cutty Peter. You know, this is a guy I am saying to people. He had a big boat bus in Guelph, and he used to fill this bus of people when St. John's Sports played football and cricket and what have you. And that was all for free. And the park is named after him. And Naka's book gives a profile of people like that. And it is something that, you know, people of all ages need to go through, because sometimes we think we are recreating, we are inventing, and maybe those of us who born in the 50s and 60s, maybe should be in a rocking chair home. But I will tell you that these people who were born in the 20s and maybe early 1900, you would see how capable they were in organizing parish sports and village sports.
Mm-hmm. And St. John's in particular has been one of the, I don't know if it's still, but up until recent, the only parish council, well, existing and operating parish councils, you know. But it's interesting enough, I was going through the book, you know, and quite a lot the parish has achieved outside of the Kirani James. When you think about table tennis, for example,
400 meters. Read the 400 meters history. Kirani was just the culmination of a long history.
Donald Perry and you know, and you could just name them, you know, and somehow St. John's was a pinnacle of sports in Grenada. Football with the various teams as St. John's Sports, well, which basically culminated, I think, with the team. You had the Ball Wizards and all these other teams. And Ray, you will know about that in terms of covering sports. The parish itself, St. John's, has delivered its fair share to the development of sports in Grenada.
Well, I call it the parish that produces the elite Grenadian athletes in just about everything you could think about. I mean, I didn't see Peter Ponga, but Dr. Gittins, who's still alive, he told me that was a masterful class. I mean, he was a masterful class, and he was one of those passionate followers of sports. And the book itself talks about Peter Ponga. I mean, somebody who people had to get a shoe, football boots for the play, and he was able to represent Grenada in an era when you had to be at a certain, GBSS or PB, wherever it is, you had to come from some kind of this elite club then, and he was able to walk his way into that club. I see Rosemary was saying very interesting. Rosemary's from Victoria,
Well,
one of
yeah,
those one of those passionate hurricane people.
yeah. And the rivalry, and Ray, when we talk about sports in the parish of St. John's, we also will link it to an extent to the nearby parish of St. Mark, because they always had that rivalry as well.
Well, St. Mark's to me was always special. You know, if Obin Chillingford is listening, I will tell you. I remember when he ever the Winner Lion Solomons played, he would be with Sampat and Black Sheep, and these are the fellows that used to lime in those days. And if you go to Victoria, you had to go to a gentleman, peg leg. Peg leg had a disability, but at the end of every football match between Dauntless or Atoms and Hurricane or whoever it is, peg leg home in Victoria was a must stop. He prepared this fish broth, and these fellas were there to have the whatever drinking it was. You know, I see Roy Reddit. I said to him in the church a Sunday, "You still one of the people I admired." I don't think he remembered me, but as I said to the people, I remember when I used to be on the beach. Roy Redhead, who played Grenada for Grenada, captain the Grenada team in the Popham Cup in those days. They used to run from the top of the beach, the 1 mile stretch of beach, backward and forward. And but I got a chance to speak to some of them, well, particularly Sampat, because when I left school, the first job I get was to be with Sampat. And they said it strengthened your leg. And Toro's brother, Yankee Man, he did a lot of that on Grants Beach. Now, these days, I know there are gyms and what have you know, but there's a complete disappearance of people on the beach in the morning. Sometimes you see Junior Murray. Sometimes you see maybe a couple of athletes. I saw Michael, you're going to talk to him soon, the footballer, the Grenada coach. He came a couple of mornings. He's back in New England now.
Shalry.
So, shall we? Right, right. We had a good talk there on the beach, and we all say the same thing. I mean, yes, technology has brought us gyms into our home and so forth, but the beauty of that area, the sanity of it, I mean, it certainly helps in some ways. So again, when I go to see, the last time I went to Victoria to see a football match, I asked the people if everybody in Victoria are millionaires. They asked me why. I said, well, I can't see anybody selling drinks. Nobody's selling anything. So everybody has to. The Victoria I know, there was little bars, people coming around in a bucket. There were popcorn. There were just about every little thing that tambourine balls and so forth.
The
Same thing in
community.
yeah, yeah. A Pomsite or whatever it is. You go to Guam now and I'm asking the same thing. I say the same thing to Jerry Alexis. Everybody here get big shot by. You're not seeing it. And those were the little things that perhaps brought out you haven't seen someone in a long time. So you stop to buy this thing and you share it, and then you rekindle memories.
Mhm.
So there are small things to me. And I say to people, look, I've gone to England so many times. What I enjoy most about England, your family will take you to a club. And in that club, there seems to be everything. So I can't understand when people tell me there's no, I mean, clubs are old time thing. I mean, you go to Trinidad and you go down to Queen's Park, the club exists. Queen's Park Rangers Club, not Queen's Park, Queen's Park Cricket Club. Yes, it's a big organization, but the point I'm making, there's some there's some um, institution or some gathering where people manage a process. And we need to see, I don't know that there's any club or anybody trying to create that kind of club gathering. Public Workers Union was where at times people used to come at one point and whoever it is. Now, believe it or not, it's just the few of us they don't even play badminton in Public Workers again. They don't even play badminton. So how do we resurrect it? I don't know. The only place there's a squash court in the stadium. It's hardly used.
Mhm.
So there are areas that we can at least try to keep people together because that is what is important. When you have a team that could understand each other, not just through the meeting, but in other ways to get out of it. Bumpy Griffith always tell me the most successful GFA administration group of administrators they had was when they had Ambrose Stanislaus himself. They used to go to one another home, maybe once a month, once every fortnight, to have breakfast. The wives would prepare it. And that became the basis of everything. But if you're going to do that in the meeting hall, quite clearly, you didn't get a chance to tete-a-tete over some of the issues that may be contentious.
Yeah, and well, Rosemary came back to make that point, Ray, and I think is developing on what you said earlier about more emphasis on sports should be considered from preschool onward to ensure that students become more physical inclined and also to address the issue of obesity in children.
Correct. And again, as I said, I don't know why we have stopped these things. But again, Mike, as I go back to the need to have greater investment in TAM. We have TAM CCA, and it's growing. And as I heard you said what evening it was, there is Bayam who has the experience of professional basketball. So there are people who you can pull out. I remember when TAM CC was starting, Prime Minister Mitchell told me, he was in opposition then, that he registered in the faculty because they needed a certain amount of PhDs. And he was one of the people with a PhD. So he became part of the staff, not full-time and not with pay, but to lend lend his qualification that
For
it
the
becomes a recognized institution.
and for
So I'm
credit,
saying,
yeah,
right. So I'm saying there are SGU, there are multiplicity of people with varying qualifications that we need maybe the Olympic committee, the bingo, or the lottery, whatever we call it now, Ministry of Sports. That's an approach perhaps the sports associations themselves must take up and pioneer. Because if we have more trained people, imagine, Michael, that coaches, we pick coaches these days. Michael was a good player. Harold was a good player. So at the end of his career, we make him a coach. But really and truly, we just give him a walk in out of gratis.
Mhm.
But if we were to say to Michael and Harold and all the others, you are going to go through TAM CC for the 2-year program, and you come out there with an associate degree, and you could perhaps head to SGU for the bachelor's now, you are marketable beyond just being a national player.
Yeah.
In fact, your career is strengthened because you have national representation experience as well as certification from an institution. So I think these are the things we need to get into sports if we want to begin to get much more out of what we have. Because I believe, I heard Joel was talking about a quarter mile relay team. There's no doubt about it. We could find a multiplicity of talent, particularly in athletics, because that seems to be embedded in our DNA.
Yeah, and I enjoy this discussion because I always see the need for continuity in sports after school life. We don't have no structured organization / clubs. How can we curb that problem, Ray?
Well, it has to be something that is community minded. I spoke to you about Brian a while ago in the lines. Um, you remember you from a road, and your mother would know. In fact, you should learn from your mother. Your mother was one of the fiercest Queens Park Rangers fan, together with Daisy
Eve,
and Chenny's sister there,
Eve.
um, Eve. I mean, the amount of cussing I get from them
I know.
for describing Queen's Park in all sorts of ways. I mean, I used to go and try to get my vocabulary to a point where I know it will hurt them. I mean, you remember Queen's Park Rangers and Margaret and Toro, Cleve, you remember that? Queen's Park Rangers on a Saturday with Barbara, Nat Simpson wife, and Jero, and the whole works of them. Saturday with Thomas Cannot, Tommy, who was a referee. No, he
Yeah.
wasn't a referee, President Arena. They had a gathering downstairs the pavilion, maybe every fortnight. And we from Grenada, Lou Smith, I remember used to be there. We finished work, we head down to Queen's Park Rangers. I am saying we need some of these things. In the case of our grandstand, we had a place where we call the shed. Well, now there is what you call the upper room, which is the Catholic, a new place the Catholic Church built. I'm not too sure I'm seeing, yes, we go there to pray and to do church activities. But a couple of days ago, I was asked to be a part of the parish council, and I was saying to them, you know, I got into this thing. They were saying, "Hail Mary, Mother of God." Me and some little fellas, we throw a little stone on top of the church. Hail Mary, we were about 10 years. Boom, we threw a little stone. The nuns came and she kidnapped all of us. When the nuns said, don't move, you didn't move. And we became part of that group. It was the Catholic Youth Organization. We went into the convent and we all were retooled. And when somebody, a Berean, joined it, he said it can't be Catholic anymore. So find a new name. So we call it Progressive Youth Organization. And we stayed there until the early 90s. So I'm saying to people that it has to be a way of, just as how the political parties have constituency groups, we have to find a way to tell, whether it's the politicians or the churches or whoever it is, there are no CYOs as before, you know. The CYOs I see now, not the same CYO I know. The Brave Boy in Birch Grove, and we became friends because of CYO. We end up table tennis friends. In fact, the phone just rang, and I know he called to find out how I'm doing. So you're talking about 50 years of that kind of friendship because Peter Joseph, these are the fellows I got to know through CYO, and friendship still there. So there has to be something via the churches, the national women's organizations, and all the little groups and so forth must begin to value. I know it's not the same thing like when I was young. You have internet, you have talk shop, you have chats and so forth. But we need to mobilize people in an organized way. If not, we're going to feel the consequences of it more and more. And I'm saying that because, you know, I noticed some of the groups that I used to be in the trade union, you're seeing the same thing. Everybody would give a donation, but you're not coming to meeting. So really and truly, when you come to the meeting, it's because the issue already is overboiling, and who you're going to fight already in the ascendancy. So we need to begin from the beginning.
I love that, and I remember how you got converted, Ray.
Yep, I'm telling you. I'm telling you. Yep. This is how it was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, but we have less than 15 minutes to go with the program. We go on top of the hour because, folks, Ray has a very important tournament, a veterans tournament. We hear about the results sometime during the week, table tennis tournament that he has to go in. Ray, but how can we match sports with education to create student athletes as part of the development process?
Well, again, it has to begin with parents. It has to begin at home. You know, I say to people, some of the brightest people who emerged in the 70s were the best sports people in Grenada. Let's take Wendell Thomas. I think he's a practicing attorney in Washington, somewhere around there. Wendell was the top table tennis player, captain of the football team, on the athletics team, and in the cricket team. And in those days was A levels, and he was at the top of the line in A levels. He didn't finish 1 and 2, but he was in the top line. The same thing with fellas as Dr. God George, Roland St. Paul's. I could just call a list of names, people who were premier sports people, and at the same time, top of the line academically. Again, it has to be something that the parents must be conscious about and not allow one to dominate the other, but certainly create the avenue that the child would appreciate that sports is part of his development. There has to be a time schedule for it, as well as a time schedule for academics. But again, Mike, it goes back to when we used to be on radio. You know, as I say to people, we highlighted both the academic and the education. And it was done either through a commentary or through what we had then was a Saturday program like what you're having now. I mean, remember that was an integral part. It started during the PRG era, 79, and it continued into the 90s. I don't think it's existing anymore. But again, I remember we had a Saturday program, which we called the Brain of Sports, where you went back in times to highlight those of yesteryear, and it was a question. It was which brought clubs together. You had 16 clubs participating, and the audience also participated. So really and truly,
Our great
there has
Pele, our great Pele was part of that as well.
that's correct.
Yeah.
And there's the late Anthony George, who was,
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
yeah, you know, as I say to people, that these things, they may look trivial, but when you look at life in itself, as you get older, you would see that they all contributed in some way towards your civil behavior. Because academic by itself, I mean, it's not going to get you. There has to be a civil part of you. Because, you know, you go to work and the temperaments are all a mixture. So you got to learn to treat with everyone. And sports in itself is one of the tonics that help you to sort of understand behavior patterns.
Mhm. Yes. Well, the Tantin soft shoe competition stopped traffic so much. So they, referring to the Grenada Football Association, begged us to slow down because we were disrupting Premier League games. Applaud to Charlie Hood. That's from Clev. There's also a commentary from there's a need for urgent constitutional reform to these associations. Too many of this president and executive take full ownership as their personal investment, something that people have complained have affected the the effectiveness of these sporting associations.
You're right about that, but the problem is people are not showing interest in the affairs of these organizations. Not enough people are participating. Um, Michael, the best example is to attend an association general meeting. And you would see after the meeting, not after the meeting, once the refreshment comes, how many reports are on the ground. The secretary's report, the minutes, the treasurer's report. It's just not healthy when you see, go to a general meeting, how people gravitate to the eating part and not to the intellectual part of the discussion. I mean, I call it maybe it's a brand of the politics that we have inherited because that's what you see in politics. You have to have food and you have to have drinks, and then there's a scramble for it. But we perhaps need to have what is missing too, and I would say a lot about, I don't want to call any number, but our secondary schools, unfortunately, I don't think many of them have the kind of principles that we had in the days gone by. Let's take um, and well, I'll even go to Ashby, who is a recent one. I mean, I remember St. George's wanted 10 boys to assist in a tournament we had. I had to write Mr. Ashby. I have the letter here still. After the game, Mr. Ashby write me to find out how many of these boys turned up and what time. I had to fake. I have to write this thing in and create my imagination. No, I met Mr. Ashby. I said, what you wanted that for? He said, Ray, you're mad. Who you think I am? I'm the principal. I want to know who showed up and who didn't show up. No, I'm saying to you today, you see some schools and you wonder if there is really anybody interested in sports. They come to play, you may see a teacher, then the teacher may be on a cell phone or is somewhere along the line, and he or she is perhaps asked to come and not there because of that Carlos Thomas kind of culture or that Victor Loa kind of culture. So I know we have some. SAS used to have my good friend. I'm trying to remember his name
Julian?
No, Julian was overzealous, but I'm talking about the games master himself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you must have. He went there for he's gonna beat up me when he meet me. He spent about 30 years. He was responsible for all these guys and them, all the top artists at one point. He always said to me, Ray, you forget my name more than anybody else. He left there about a couple of years ago, in any case. And I hope I remember his name. But these are the people who help to make a difference because they take it on not just as sports, as a responsibility. Let's just take Michael Pierre in 1 minute. Michael Pierre told me, who was the principal of SAS. He said, Ray, it's interesting to find out how Francique emerging. I say, tell me. He said, let me tell you. Francis was on a scholarship, and Francis was one of those boys that gave real trouble. He was a good cricketer. He said, but every day he had a knocking with somebody in a class. So he said he reached the stage where he had enough of this boy, and he was a strong fellow. So he said he sent for him, and he come upstairs, and he must appear and slack, take out the tie, and he said, well, you beat everybody, so beat me now. I'm the last one. So the young man started crying, and he outlined his problems with him, problems and so forth. I won't go through the problem. But he said to me, Ray, he called the talk shop, and he said to the talk shop, I want you to give this boy lunch every day. And he said to him, in return, I want you to run and beat just about everybody you encounter. So Francis told me that in an interview also too, that he wanted to make Mr. Pierre look bad. So he started on this role. And he said every time he go back to Mr. Pierre say, where you time? He said, boy, go no man. Them fellas you beat can't run. And he said that became a part of his life in school, that he has to prove this man wrong. And that was the genesis of him being an athlete, because as he realized he wasn't a 12-year-old, he started really, well, I wouldn't say late, but certainly at a time when perhaps people like Kirani were established already. So I'm saying that you principals have a key role to play in nurturing that young Form 1, Form 2, Form 3, Form 4, Form 5, through the teachers to be appreciative of sport. I'm not too sure I'm seeing a lot of that in schools today. I see too many schools just come and play. Yes, there's a teacher. Yes, there may be a games master. But then in another year or two, they either gone to the States or they gone to SGU or they find a better job and the sport is left alone. So we need to find a way to recruit people who want to make physical education a career and not just a part-time affair.
Okay. We just have less than 5 minutes remaining. And speaking about principal and teacher, here is one from Jacqueline Smith, the great Jacqueline Smith, that we will know very much of. But she's saying we need good holiday recreation programs, Revo model of it such, well structured. And it is poor people children that stop play sports because they are marginalized in the fight for scholarship. And she ends by asking Ray, how do you get to the Olympic Association?
It's very easy. You have to be a part of one of the 17 national sports organizations. You have to be a delegate representing them at meetings, and your national association must be affiliated to the regional and international parent bodies, and you have to have all the requirement of a constitution and clearly a bank account and a functioning executive. I know that Red said that some of them don't function properly. That is true. But that's what it is. The Olympic Committee comes from the 17 national federations in Grenada. And this year is an election year, but that has not happened because of COVID. And I suspect it will happen sometime in the future. But that's how you get there.
Mhm. There are two things I want to get through to you, Ray, briefly before we wrap up there. One has to do, you have heard about the resignation of Mr. Charlie George as president of the Athletic Association.
Yes, and I would say I want to salute Charlie. I remember my first year in athletics. We used to have this Grandlands Athletics PYO, and we had this track and field game in Monuge, and Charlie George and Charlie Francis and the late Decoto and Dan Darat and them came and they supervised. And if you talk to Ellis Maitland, he will tell you that's where he recorded one of his better times as a little boy and Goatee Robinson. And they got me involved in athletic association. In fact, they got Grandlands affiliated. And when I came in there, Charlie was the secretary. And then Charlie gave it up. Sandy Ford became the secretary, and Charlie went off, and then he came back. And I would say Charlie has been one of the unsung heroes of athletics. Very quiet fella. Do not go on any radio and television. Do not want to be seen in the media. Period. He's only unless he's forced to go there. But his services to sports, I would say, as far as I'm concerned, worth the highest recognition. His absent, I don't know. That would be I know people been calling for changes, but boys, people like Charlie used to do things behind the scene that you may not see. But a games stage in Queen's Park. Michael, I don't know, you were in organizing the Grenada International. Michael, these things have a lot of bills, eh? I can tell you I can tell you that these things have bills to pay, and that's why some people, particularly if they're married, and their wife realize, you know, the late he was principal at GBSS, Mr. Oh God, what's his name again? He when Michael Hyacinth and them went to the Commonwealth Games, um, he went to the bank to take a loan and had to end up paying that loan. Eh? He had to end up paying the loan because the bank don't lend association. You have to sign as the person representing the association. If this association can pay, they deduct from your salary. So there are a lot of things in these organizations that you see there. Uh, Royston I will tell you about the 1979 Grenada World Cup thing. The three Mexican referees came here. When they reached in the park, the first thing they asked for, their fees. They couldn't pay them the fees because the gate receipt could not pay. The gate receipt was about $10,000, and their fee was about 3,000 US, 1,000 each. So Royston had to call Walter St. John. Walter's wife, she was assistant manager in the bank, has to open the bank on a Sunday to her influence. I'm telling you that that's not fake. That's not make news. To get the money to pay these referees so that the game can play between Grenada and Guyana. And the hotel bill, well, Royston will tell you, if you interview one of these, ask him how they paid the bill. So it is not that some people think that you're president and these things cost things that you don't know about. I'm telling you the truth. Sometimes I myself wonder why are we getting involved in some of these things.
Yeah, well, I can see that from, and one thing I can see from Mr. George, he was not the type that likes to travel, for example,
Yeah,
because
you don't.
yeah,
Yeah,
I remember. Yeah, I remember meeting him in Moscow some years ago, and it's only because they
yeah,
specifically asked that he be there. He
that's
said
right.
that it's not something he likes. He avoids all these things. But Ray, the final thing I wanted to ask you about is post-COVID, the post-pandemic. What you think will be sports, not just in Grenada, but the sub-region of the Caribbean, because it will be affected. The discussion is already on whether or not how sports will be able to get a line item in the budget, for example, with competing like health and education and all these other sectors. But and I bring this question to you in the context of the region is being seen as the biggest tourism destination, but have they really exploited the potential of sports tourism market, for the region? And we look at that in the context of the post-pandemic. How do you see sports in Grenada and the wider Caribbean?
Well, Michael, the first challenge you face is that you have mass unemployment. I heard that Anthony Boson, who was the former Minister of Finance and who's a member of Parliament, saying that unemployment might be in the 50% range now, late 40s in the 50%. So you have to find some way to help those who are unemployed. And unlike a hurricane, Ivan, where we had people like you and Margaret and Cleveroy and Harold and so forth saying a barrel, there ain't no barrel coming now, eh? So, and then SGU does not function in Grenada for the time being in terms of employment opportunities. So, Michael, the first problem we face is satisfying that basic need of food on the table. And this is the one we have to treat with. That is going to be a colossal battle for governments across the OECS. In fact, I saw Antigua not too long ago in St. Lucia. In St. Lucia, the government was asking public officers to be lenient. And I see in Antigua, they were asking, the prime minister was saying he may have to borrow X amount to do certain things to keep workers funded. So we are having that challenge all about. In Grenada, I heard the prime minister saying revenue is down by 50%. So that is the first challenge. I don't know that there's an easy formula for that. Yes, you could do statistics and come up with all sorts of permutation as to how you'll get around it. But that is going to be the first challenge. You spoke about tourism. Michael, I don't see that happening in any big way soon. I live in the tourism area. I mean, the hotels are empty, the taxi drivers are unemployed, and they're going to be unemployed for quite a while. People are scared about anybody coming from America, including you, Bascom. If you come, people would be running away too. So, so that in itself poses a problem. How do we treat with those symptoms first? How do we alleviate the fear of people that those who are coming in this period of the pandemic without the world having a vaccine? How do we treat with that fear? Because that fear is what is creating the problem. Eh? So I would hope, and I wouldn't make any pronouncement, but I would hope not just the political directorate, I would hope that those of us in sports would give some time to sit down and tete-a-tete and come up with some kind of come up with a constructive ideas, maybe not constructive, but ideas as to how we could treat with that in the aftermath of COVID. Now you spoke about sports continuing. Sports will continue. I guess I noticed that the basketballers and the footballers are, I don't want to say ignoring the protocol, but some of them are, and they are going ahead enjoying their recreation. The good thing is that it seems that we are being blessed thus far. We hope that no one who is infected would be involved in any of these recreational activities. But so far, I would think that we've seen the motivation of people to play sports. As to how OECS and Caribbean competitions will go forward, we will be going forward with that. I think the Trinidad tournament,
CPL.
the CPL will give us a sort of gauge as to how we can begin to treat with hosting regional events, because as you realize, a lot of discipline will have to be involved. The sponsorship of the private sector would be not as it used to be. So, Michael, I am optimistic that we are going to have the energies to find a way to go forward. But, Mike, I think that will take some time. And again, it will depend on the discipline of we, the people, because it certainly wouldn't be no rush to achieve what we think we have worked so hard to achieve. Let's take the games next year. I mean, I look at, and I have to really admire Anderson Peters and the St. David's group in particular, and the people in Tarantine, Joseph and Lee, who are continuing to work with athletes individually, and the swimming people too. They're on the beach, can't use the pool, but they are doing. I know the sea and the pool are two different things completely, but the coaches are making some effort to keep people active and motivated. But Mike, I see no easy way out of this thing. This thing will take just not a one man perceiving he has all the, all what it takes to go forward. We have to sit down as an organization and as individuals collectively and see how we could come up with the best ideas. But I want to wish all in the OEC as well. And I hope the people like the Keith Joseph, the Vida Bruno, the St. Lucian Minister of Sports, whatever her name again is, and Dominica Shillingford is the sports director up there. I would hope that they all in Antigua. I know there are some talented, passionate sports people. St. Kitts, no question about the passion St. Kitts has for sports and neighbors. So across the OECS, there is this burning passion. But I hope as a sub-region, we could find a way to use the technology to begin to engage with each other, to find some ideas as to how we could crawl and creep and then walk forward.
Okay, what a nice way to end this program, Ray. And I want to wish you all the best in your tournament later on.
It's an old man tournament, Mike. It's
yeah,
only old people.
can you tell us some of the competitors we expect?
Well, Ken Joseph is highly enthusiastic. He's overzealous, in fact. Trevor Lane is there. Nelson Lewis is there. David McKenzie is there. Forsyth is there. I think Michael Lendo may be playing. He's a local attorney. About half a dozen of us. No, it's about 10 of us. We have it in two groups, 5 each, and the top two comes. The top two will advance. Then the final, the semifinals, and the final. Charlie would be there too, but Charlie will not be playing because Charlie has a back problem. But Charlie will be there to observe.
Okay, that's good enough, Ray. Well, we'll hear about it during the week.
Yeah, certainly will hear about it.
Yeah, Well, thank
Yes,
you very much. Thank you very
you're
much.
welcome.
Okay
Good
then.
and nice seeing you and Michael and all the others, Toro and Margaret. They bringing back memories of RFG.
Yes, thank you very much, Ray. Obviously, we had some, Clef saying thank you, Ray, for great Saturday discussion, and all the others who are part of it, Margaret and Harold and all the others. Thank you very much, Ray. Okay
Good
then.
luck. God bless.
Okay then. So that's our program for today. Letting you know that come Thursday we have Fitzgerald Naka Joseph on his book and speaking about sports in the parish of St. John. And stay tuned for the next guest for next Saturday. And hopefully next Saturday we'll have our tag team with us. That's Roll Titus should be joining the tag team as we continue to to bring what we call a Saturday Sports Special live from New York and connecting with all the movers and shakers of sports, not just in Grenada, but in the OECS and by large the Caribbean, including here in North America. But just by way of information, on Thursday we have Fitzgerald Naka Joseph, the former national basketball coach. He's also a sports administrator and now an author. And then the following Thursday, we'll have professional basketballer Akim Robertson. He will be on. And the final Thursday in the month of August, para-athlete Ishona Charles, as she prepares for the Paralympics, she will be our guest on the Talks Sports program. Thank you very much, one and all. Margaret, Michael Sullivan, Cleve, Toro, Jacqueline, Harold, Titus, Nichols, the host of Joel Phillip, all of you, Anthony Howard and others. Thank you very much for being part of this program. Thank you, Toro, and see you on Thursday.